Hey everybody, this is my Dwarf pea puffer tank, and today we're going to do a simple before and after video. I'm just going to do a water change, a gravel vac, and of course I got to hang on the back filter in there, so that's a simple matter of just changing the filter pad out, so that's always sort of a given whenever I do a water change on one of these small tanks like this. But I'm also going to remove a lot of the plants that are in there. You see all that dark green in there? That is cyanobacteria. It's growing on there kind of thick. It's sort of hard to tell on this camera with the glare like that, but it's developing sort of a scummy mat of the cyanobacteria on the surface of the water. So I'm going to pull that out altogether and just throw it away, get rid of it. I'm not going to do any other treatment on the tank than that. It's just sort of a matter of staying on top of it. It seems like no matter how many times I've treated for it, it always comes back eventually. So again, it's not that big of a deal to me. I don't bother with it too much. One of the things, however, that I'm going to do today in this tank that might help with it is I'm going to replace the fluorescent tube in this tank. It's way overdue. If you've got a planted tank, they really should be replaced about once a year, maybe once every 18 months on the outside is. And again, that all depends on the light needs of your plants. I usually have pretty low need plants. They don't need a ton of light, so the quality of light that they get can be a little less, and they still do okay. If you've got a high-tech planted tank and you've got some really specific light requirements with your plants, then you certainly need to stay on top of keeping your lights nice and fresh, and then that way the plants get all the proper color spectrums that they need. So this tank is definitely getting much dimmer. When the light comes on in the morning, it takes much longer for the tube to warm up and for it to come up to full brightness. So this is my very first tank I ever bought. The tube in there is probably 5 years old now. So today is the day we're going to replace it. And this is what we're going to replace it with. It's a simple 18-inch GE. You can get Sylvania, whatever. As long as you get a good brand name, high quality fluorescent tube. It's standard T8. But here's the important part to pay attention to. See where it says daylight? You cannot go by that. There's no industry standard. Everybody puts whatever they want to put on their own tubes. So I had the choice today from daylight, natural light. There was one that was actually specifically for plant and aquariums. And when you actually look at what's important, I've never seen it called the color appearance before, and I don't know why I'm having such a hard time getting it to focus on this. I tried earlier as a test run to see if it would focus, and it just does not want to focus on that section right there. So there you go. 6500K. That usually will say color temperature, not color appearance. That is what you want to look at. I don't care if it says daylight. I don't care if it says bright white. I don't care what the manufacturer has decided to call it. In this case, they're calling it daylight. But another company may call daylight something else completely. So the one I saw earlier today, when I was buying this one, was for plants and aquariums, and it was a 3400K bulb, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, maybe I've heard something dumber than that, I'm sure, at some point. If you got plants, you want a minimum, I would say, of 5500K, and then up to, ideally, you want maybe 65 or 6700K. 6500K is by far the most common when you get up into that lighting. It's more, you can think of the industrial lighting when you're in a school or an office building and it's got that sort of unpleasant bluishy sort of light. Not the best looking light to put in your aquarium. I'm not going to argue with that. That's why the aquarium and plant light was only a 3400K. It gives you a nice softer appearance and it looks a lot more pleasing on the eye. But your plants need certain wavelengths of light, and those wavelengths of light are much more in the blue end of the spectrum, so you need that higher color temperature to get those blues in there, and then your plants will do much better. The reason I started out by saying that the cyanobacteria might get helped a little bit by the new tube is that cyanobacteria is a very, very primitive plant, I'll say. It's organism. It's sort of like a cross between a plant and a bacteria. That's how primitive it is. And it actually thrives best in the middle range of the light spectrum, the visible light spectrum, which comes in with the sort of yellow, greens, and oranges in the middle of the spectrum. And that's what happens to a bulb, or a tube I should say, as it begins to wear out and get old and you get less and less quality of light. That's what I mean by quality of light. The color temperature begins to degrade and you wind up getting a lot less blues and a lot more of these middle spectrum lights, which the cyanobacteria thrives in. So putting a nice brand new light in there and having that nice bright 6500K again, that's not going to stop the cyanobacteria from growing. It'll still get plenty of light and still be able to grow just fine, but I won't be flooding it with the light that it really does best under. And that will help sort of reduce how quickly it comes back. It will actually help increase the rate of growth on my other plants, which will then draw nutrients out of the tank faster, and so on and so forth. So keeping your lights up to date is always a good idea. And when I talked about getting nice bright white light in there again, I'm not talking about the lumens. I'm not talking about how bright it is visually. I'm talking about the whiteness of it, the color temperature quality of the light spectrums rather than the actual intensity or the lumens, which doesn't really one of these days I will shoot a video where I'll talk about the difference between lux and lumen and par and all that stuff, because it's really confusing when you're trying to figure out what to look at when you're looking at what kind of lights you need, because you'll say this one puts out this many lumens, but that one has this color temperature, and then this one's called daylight, and it can get really confusing. So the long and short of planted tanks is, when in doubt, just go with 6500K. Don't worry about anything else. If it says 6500K on it, you're not probably going to go wrong unless you've got some really, really unusual specific plant that requires some certain color spectrum or whatever, and that's unlikely. So when in doubt, go with that 6500K, whether it's a tube or an LED or whatever. That is going to be your probably ideal growing color temperature spectrum. So let me get on with doing a little bit of water change on here. I'll get that tube replaced. One more thing I do want to point out is when you're growing plants, you want as much light to get to the plants as possible. So look how dirty that cover is. Again, I know the white's going to sort of wash out the video, but you get an idea. That really needs a good wiping down inside and out, and this gives you a little better idea of how sort of scummy mat of cyanobacteria is growing on the surface. So that's all going to come out today. I will also be wiping down that glass so that more of the light gets down into the tank and penetrates. In a situation like this with very low light plants in a very small tank, that's not really significant, but in a deeper tank with higher lighting needs, that dirty glass reduces a significant amount of light getting in your tank, and you should really keep on top of keeping that cleaned down as much as you keep your viewing pane. The glass we're looking through right now, the front of the aquarium should stay just as clean as your light plates should. Anyway, I'm going to get on with doing the water change and everything. Give me 2 seconds, and here's your before. Alright, there's your after. So it really makes quite a difference. I know the removal of the plants kind of skews it a little bit. Those plants really did block a lot of the light. Even the cyanobacteria was blocking a lot of the light, and that makes it a little hard to tell the difference between the more accurate color temperature versus simply more light being in the tank because the plants are out of the way. But suffice it to say, I still think it looks a lot different and it looks a lot better, and we should see a little bit of an improvement in the growth of the plants I have in the tank. My new water sprite here, this came out of my 125 in the basement. I just snipped a couple little tips of the fronds off. Neither one of these has any kind of roots or anything at all, but let's just wait and see. It'll be no time at all before you will start seeing these develop roots. You'll start seeing them spread out and grow, and before you know it, in a few weeks, I'm going to have a big thick mat of water sprite with hanging roots and everything else, just like you saw a few minutes ago. It'll come back fast, don't worry. And changing the tank up a little bit now and again keeps these fish interested. Gives them, something to think about, something to do, new things to explore. Typically, you might think of adding things for them to look at, you know, having all those roots to swim around in and all of those fronds to swim around. And that's true, but the fact that I just removed a bunch of stuff changed their tank. So now the tank is still different to them, and it's just a way of mixing it up a little bit. So pulling those plants out of there was necessary, but it also has some other little bonus effects as well. It's going to open up the tank enough to let the light in, and it's going to give the fish a little change of scenery for a while, which is always good for fish like puffers. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed. I do have several other videos I'm working on. I'm really trying to get some done today. It's another rainy day. So if you're subscribed, you won't miss any of those. I've got a discussion about fish deaths. I've got a discussion about dissolved solids coming up and dissolved oxygen, and so on and so forth. And you don't want to miss any of that. So again, make sure you're subscribed, and you won't miss any of that. Don't forget, this is my pea puffer tank. See you real soon in the next one.